So as a part of some of my goals that I set at the beginning of the year, one of those goals was to read 24 books. And this was initially inspired by a YouTuber called John Fish, who is a undergraduate student at Harvard University. And although I have not gotten to the level of efficiency as he has, I feel I'm going pretty well, and so I'm on track to complete 24 books. Anyways, in my pursuit of finding books, I came across one book by the name of On the Shortness of Life, and this was by the Stoic philosopher named Seneca. And Seneca was born in 5 BC and lived to 65 AD, all circa. And the book, more so along the lines of an essay actually, is called On the Shortness of Life. And in this book is actually a culmination of 3 essays that I purchased. But the main essay I wanted to talk about today is the essay he wrote called On the Shortness of Life. On the Shortness of Life is essentially a critique of the human condition with regards to how we spend our time. And it's a very interesting book, and it's addressed to another Roman senator named Paulinius. After reading this book, however, I felt a very strong and profound sense of change within me. I felt a greater sense of presence, a greater sense of being, and maybe that is because the major theme that he talks about, which is time essentially. And so I just wanted to go over the most salient points that I gathered from reading this short essay. I partially believe that this had actually a very big impact on me because it was written so long ago, and it's just very interesting to read the works of a very, very brilliant man who, despite all these years that have gone on, despite all the technological change that has, swept us up, and despite all the advancement we've made as a human race, we as a species are actually quite primitive in terms of how we think. And it's a very stark reality that I came across when reading this, because it was a sense of, not a lot has changed. It's quite a sad thing. But at the same time, I think upon reading this, you can gather a very strong sense of ownership over your life and over your time. And I think that's the point of Seneca's writing in this short essay, is that you are the beholder of your own time. You have complete responsibility of what you make of your time. And that's one of the major points in this short essay, is life is only as much as you make it, essentially. Okay, so these were some of the most profound and impactful ideas that I gathered from reading his essay. So, point 1. We are heavily protective of our possessions, ideas, property, and yet our time, our most valuable asset, is handed out to arbitrary things, activities, and people who have no care for it. Over the past year, another goal that I've been trying to implement in my life, emphasis on trying, is to be more productive, more efficient, and basically use as much time as I possibly can. This is particularly relevant, obviously, because of the digital age, being a millennial, how much time we're spending on our phone. And so what I wanted to do is measure how much time I'm actually wasting. And so this was as simple as, just tracking my time on an app. You can look at, there's many apps that you can download to track your time. And I slowly but surely started to discover how much time I was wasting. And this would be on Instagram, on Facebook, the rest. I found it particularly eye-opening, considering that this piece of writing that Seneca wrote 2,000 years ago is applicable to a new digital age, which he probably didn't even foresee. This is a completely new civilization, and yet the applicability in terms of how applicable it is to our everyday lives is incredible. Seneca writes, "So, what is the reason for this? You are living as if destined to live forever. Your own frailty never occurs to you. You don't notice how much time has already passed, but squander it as though you had full and overflowing supply, though that very day which you are devoting to somebody or something may be your very last." It was a very eye-opening quote in the sense that it triggered a realization within me that I'm not treating time as an asset, but as a ubiquitous entity, this universal privilege that is afforded to all of us, and not an asset. And so we go throughout our lives spending it on trivial things and spending it on items or people or things that don't add value to us. Because of our lack of awareness behind time being the most powerful asset, it is basically reduced to the value that we expend it on. Seneca goes on to say, "People are delighted to accept pensions and gratuities of which they hire out labor of their support of their services, but nobody works out the value of time. Men use it lavishly as it costs nothing. But if death threatens these same people, you will see them praying to their doctors." So as you can see, Seneca treats his time not only as a universal privilege that is afforded to him, but as an asset, something that is invaluable, and that it must be spent on the right things, just as any other currency is. Point 2. We are often told to live our lives, and yet we aren't directed on how to do this. This is a very strong theme within Seneca's writing in this essay. There's a lot of talk about the cost of life and what it takes to get somewhere, what it takes to be the man of Rome. And it's a very strong theme because, as mentioned before, time is an asset and we have to spend it very wisely. But everything is spent at the cost of something, and sometimes that cost is the cost of life, the cost of time. Seneca makes a strong argument that we have to go out and live our life, but he also very intelligently points out that there's actually a lack of guidance on how to do so. He recognizes that although we are told to live our lives, there's actually no way or no proper way, no one tells us how to do this. And it's very interesting to read something like that today because, that same platitude of go out and live your life we still don't have a strong grasp of how to do so. Seneca writes, "Living is the least important activity of the preoccupied man, and yet there is nothing which is harder to learn. Learning to live takes a whole life, and which may surprise you more, it takes a whole lifetime to learn how to die." And I think this is a very intelligent criticism because he's just talking about the ubiquitous nature of living. We go throughout our lives and we're considered to be living, but are we actually living? And I think that's what Seneca's pointing out. It's such a normal thing to live our lives, and yet there's some people that are so empty at come the end of their lives. Although this is written 2,000 years ago, it is clearly a very big issue within the nature of meaning and finding meaning. And I think that's also why a lot of individuals like Jordan Peterson have flourished, because they've explored this idea of gathering meaning, and it's obviously a big issue back then, 2,000 years ago, as it is now. Another very important point that Seneca makes relating to how to live is the cost of actually attaining a life and the cost of attaining success. Seneca goes on to say in his essay, "So when you see a man repeatedly wearing the robe of office, or one whose name is often spoken in the forum, do not envy him. These things are won at the cost of life." What I thought was particularly important to gather from this point that Seneca was making was that you see someone of success and it's very easy to judge and very easy to compare your life to theirs, specifically within the age of social media. It's very prevalent within our nature as millennials and even adults now. My mum, for example, she's scrolling all the time, looking at all these other people's lives, and it's very easy to look at successful people and think, what have they gotten to get there? What have they done? And Seneca makes the very brilliant point of saying they've gotten there, but it has costed something. And that is something that's often forgotten with regards to looking at successful people. If you look at Steve Jobs, for example, he's built Apple with Steve Wozniak and all these other guys from the ground up. And at the end of the result, he's created a multinational billion-dollar company. And although that's all well and fun and he's been very successful, it has come at the cost of something. And so there's something in his life that he's had to sacrifice to get to the success he's had. And I think that's a very important point that is not talked about a lot, with successful people, is that they've gotten there, but it's at the cost of something. What Seneca also points out is that we have to go throughout our lives not just aiming for success, but to live and to get experiences that enrich us and make us happy. Now on to the last 2 points, which are a lot shorter. Our time spent planning to complete activities, meetings, events in the future result in us compromising the ability to live in the present, thus risking what we seek to achieve in the future. We have a tendency, obviously, to put things off into the future, and it's a very natural habit we have, It's planning, it's trying to do things in the future, and there's not much to it. It's important to recognize from a philosophical point of view what we're actually doing by putting things off. So Seneca says, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. You are arranging what lies in fortune's control and abandoning what lies in your control." By putting things off into the future, what we're doing is we're inadvertently removing the responsibility of doing something and putting it in control of fortune. So what Seneca is basically saying is that how do you know as an individual what is going to happen in the future? You can't plan for that. You can try to plan for it, but one thing may lead to another and you may lose control. You may not have the ability to do it anymore. So the point Seneca is trying to make is by retaining control of something in the present, although it is short, you have control over it and you can do that thing. So as opposed to pushing things off in the future, keep control of them now and do them now. And just to conclude with that point, Seneca says, "Who will allow your course to proceed as you arrange it?" So this point was probably the most profound and impactful of the rest. And I'm gonna leave it, best for last. One's age is often synonymous with how much time you've lived, and yet people can go throughout their lives without truly living. As I said, this was probably the most profound point and most impactful point in the essay. And as Seneca writes, "You must not think a man has lived long because he has white hair and wrinkles. He has not lived long, just existed long." This was very impactful for me, I think, because I have this fear of not being able to do all the things I want in life. And that actually came at the beginning of reading and coming across all these amazing books and all this amazing knowledge, this eclectic range of knowledge that I have at my disposal in the form of, of books. And I realized upon reading 1 book, 2 book, 3 book, 4 book, there is so much books I am not going to read after I die. But I could go throughout my whole life, I could get to the age of 70, not have read anything, and have basically not have lived, I could have gone throughout my whole life working 9 to 5, just working to get by, or, slugging along, then get to the age of 65, retire, and realize I've not lived, I've just gotten by, I've just, gotten old. What experiences do I have? The simple yet stark reality paints the picture of the mundane lives people live, and failing to do what is truly meaningful to them, what is true to their soul. It's quite a terrifying point to read, but I think there's beauty in that, because once you have the realization of having to live your life truly, not just aging, the world opens up to you. You realize how much you can actually accomplish if you utilize your time. If you try to maximize your efficiency, try to cut out time for people you love, cut out time for activities you enjoy, get healthy, get fit, read books, but get educated. It's obviously a very big problem, and it's a critique on the human condition. It's exploring the anxieties, the fears, the pains that people even 2,000 years ago were experiencing. And I think that's the incredible thing about this essay, is that it is still relevant to the lives of today. And I think that's a common theme amongst a lot of Stoic philosophers. I've been planning on reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and I'm going to do that very soon. I just haven't gotten to that yet. I'm assuming that I'll have a lot of the same revelations that I'm having upon reading this 30-page short essay. Anyways, that concludes pretty much the points that I wanted to cover with regards to On the Shortness of Life by Seneca. Any feedback would be greatly appreciated, and any support would be great. Make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for my next video, which is going to be with regards to self-help and the development and growth of self-help in the most recent past. As always, remember, time is everything, and see you later.